welcome. Okay, we're gonna get started. So we are recording as a reminder. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to present social impact measurement framework and apps for you. As a reminder of logistics, we're using the chat for intros as well as any questions you might have throughout the presentation. So feel free to throw your questions in there. And we are recording. When you put your introductions into the chat, put your name, your organization, your role, and your location. And then this is a quick agenda review. I've got one more person to let in. All right, so what we're going to be doing is reviewing Community Boost's 20-minute presentation, then MilkCrate's, we're going to do the MilkCrate presentation for 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. But please, again, put your questions into the chat. So quickly, I'll introduce myself, and then I'll hand it over to Reem. My name is Morgan BERMAN. I am the CEO and founder of MilkCrate. We are a mission-driven technology company, technically based in Philadelphia, although we have a very distributed team and have gone fully remote. I'm very involved in the nonprofit world, both before and after starting MilkCrate. My background working in nonprofits is what led to the creation of MilkCrate, because we exclusively pretty much serve the nonprofit industry with building affordable mobile apps that help them engage their volunteers, the people that they serve or their clients, as well as members or students. So we make it really fun and easy to launch a native mobile app for nonprofit programs. And I still stay very involved in nonprofits in addition to my work at MilkCrate by serving on the board of directors for several local organizations. And when I'm not 7.5 months pregnant and on quarantine, I'm training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I've got my contact info in there, and would love to be in touch with anyone who has more questions afterwards. Reem? Reem, I think you might still be on mute.
Oh, can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Good morning. My name is Reem FATAYERJI, and it is great to meet all of you. My current position at Community Boost, I am overseeing our finances and operations, but I've also been our impact manager. So I have been a part of our sales team and are designing our impact measurement processes, as well as how to communicate our impact for the organization. Community Boost is a digital marketing consulting agency based in San Diego, California. And so during my time at the organization, I have consulted over 800 nonprofits. My original background is within the benefit corporation and social enterprise consulting, and in the past had done B Corp evaluation work. I will actually be an incoming MBA candidate in the fall at Duke, and so excited to accelerate my understanding in the social impact space and tie that in with the business world as well. And then my contact information will be at the bottom of the screens as well. So I'll just dive into things. Let's hit that next slide. So Community Boost is a digital marketing consulting agency that's existed for about 8 years. We serve nonprofits of all different industries, size, and scope, and our main focus is on supporting organizations with traffic and conversion. We originally got started within the Google Ad Grant space, which is an opportunity for nonprofits to receive upwards of $10,000 every single month in free ad spend to drive and accelerate traffic and conversions to your website along the lines of things that people are already searching for. And so really just trying to drive new user engagement and retention and support. And so we first started out within the lines of digital marketing for within Google Ad Grants, but now we've moved within Facebook advertising as well as email marketing and analytics. And in our time in doing so, we've actually become Google certified partners and lead the Google certified partners program. And I can discuss a little bit more about what that looks like towards the end as I wrap this up. But in this most previous year, we've served quite a handful of different organizations, most particularly All Hands and Heart, Liberty Ellis Statue Foundation, Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund, Humane Society, Trevor Project, and USA Basketball. if we want to go on to that next slide. So some topics we'll cover today. We'll really assess what the basics of impact management are, how to start building your framework, value of impact management during all of what's going on right now, opportunities to look forward to ahead. And if you want to go on to the next slide as well. So community boost really got into impact measurement in quite a unique way. So pretty much as I was on the sales team, I was consulting with so many organizations and asking and pressing the question of, hey, like, what's your biggest challenge? What are you struggling to get in terms of brand awareness or in terms of donations? And 9 out of 10, almost 10 out of 10, everyone was like, we just want more donations. We just want more people to know about us. We just want more coming in. And then it was really a common theme that so many organizations were really struggling to communicate what would happen if someone were to donate. Why should someone donate? And like there was that missing piece of the puzzle down the line in the marketing funnel. And so this just kept coming up in so many different consulting conversations. And then I just started to recall my previous history within the benefit corporation evaluation space and had the opportunity to present this to our team and say, hey, like, I don't really think that there's a really powerful framework that is not only concise in time and accuracy, but also affordable for the nonprofit space. Let's build something ourselves. And so we took this on, and as Community Boost really does in all of our fashions and in all of our ways of performing and executing our services, we found that if we can perform with about 80% accuracy and accelerate the amount of time it takes to actually perform impact measurement, then we would take that trade time and time again. Rather than currently most organizations that enroll into impact management within this space, we were finding they will engage in services and evaluations that will take years and years and cost 6 figures. And it just, they were getting stuck, and it was a very limiting constraint. So many organizations just weren't proceeding with that. And so we took it upon ourselves to really dive deep and understand what the nonprofit impact management space was limited by. And we tried to reform how our approach was to measuring that impact. Currently within the impact management space for nonprofits, so many organizations are often stopped by the reality of the fact that it will take so much effort and time to do so that they don't even have a position on their team specifically dedicated just to impact measurement, which all in all alludes to deepening the issue of so many organizations just don't actually get started. And so we really wanted to find a way that could be all-encompassing to any organization at any stage of if they have someone dedicated to this, if they have an opportunity to communicate about how to begin measuring their impact. And that's really where we started building our framework. If you want to go on to that next slide. And so let's start building your impact management foundation. And the next slide. So this is the 5S approach that we designed. We realized that so often organizations are trying to do all of it all at once, and an evaluator or a consultant or what have you or a third party might come in and say, like, let's really design your approach, let's design all of this, and it's going to take 5 years and 6 figures, as I already mentioned. And we realized that's not 100% necessary in order to get started. In reality, you only need to get started with phases 1 and 2. And then once you do that, you can really dive deeper, find some data tech, maybe even MilkCrate, and find a platform that actually serves you in that tech piece, which is that study piece. And then that share piece is also really critical. So let's assess what each of these really look like. So phase 1 is where you really conduct that baseline assessment, whether that's an in-depth discovery and conceptualizing and designing for your impact, and really understanding, like, what are our goals in this process? What are we actually trying to achieve with our impact? If we were to achieve said impact, what even is that? And like, yes, we have our mission, yes, we have our vision statement, but does that actually still currently serve us? And oftentimes you can see this as an example with organizations who are saying we want to empower women. And some people on the board might view that as you're empowering women with access to education, or you're empowering women to equal pay wage, or you're empowering women in all the different arenas, which are all correct, but does that actually mean that that's the entire focus of what your organization is doing? And so it's really powerful in that first strategy phase to just realign on like, what does your mission actually mean to your team, and are your goals of impact actually still relevant? And being aligned with, okay, even if they are relevant, now let's actually conceptualize how will we achieve our impact. And then that leads into phase 2, where you're actually setting up your systems and designing your systems for how to begin collecting your impact measurement data. And so whether that is establishing your goals and actually designing your theory of change, which we'll get into that in just a second, and then you actually develop your framework and select your key metrics and your measurement plan and establish that plan. Once you complete phases 1 and 2, you're pretty much ready to then, if you're short on funding or if you need to garner more support from your board or what have you, that's a really powerful position that you can take a pause, design a full report of like, okay, this is all our intended impact, and we'll discuss what that said report looks like as we wrap this up. But once you finish phases 1 and 2, that's when you can actually reapproach those individuals and say, hey, this is like what we're really trying to achieve here, and this is our impact, but we might need some of your support in order to actually collect this data. What are your thoughts here? And then that can actually be a really great pausing point, because often it's upon collecting the data, depending on which approach you actually decide to take, that might need some additional resources. And so once you enter into phase 3, where you're actually collecting the data, monitoring it, and making data-driven decisions, that's where some additional hands come to the table, and that's where a lot of the insight and the real intuition of, okay, like, where do we need to iterate? Where do we need to keep revolving our impact? And a lot of the decisions come from stage 3. And then phase 4 is a really critical element of this, is being able to have that level of transparency, having that communication with your support base, and making sure that they actually know, where are you guys at? How are we supporting your impact? And let's see where your impact's currently at, and make sure that you're reporting that. And then it ultimately goes into stage 5, where you're just consistently scaling. And it's just honestly a total spiral, where it just continues and continues, going around and around. And you get real fun being able to talk about your impact continuously. So that is the 5S approach. If we want to go on to the next slide.
Reem, there's a little bit of an issue with your audio. Oh, it's good now.
Okay. So what is the theory of change? So a theory of change is essentially a roadmap of defining how you plan to achieve your impact. So it really presses the question of continuously answering, okay, so if this is our goal, how are we going to get there? Why is this our goal? And like really understanding like what key assumptions are leading you to that. So it helps you really clarify priorities by defining goals and the path to actually reach that goal. And it really helps press what unintended impacts might surface, and how ultimately in the big picture would your said theory of change actually become achieved. And so it really elaborates a very deeper vision of understanding what the statement of desired future of this desired future state of your organization's impact looks like, and it is a hypothesis of what it would actually take to achieve that mission success. And so then when you're doing this, it actually supports you in highlighting and surfacing what are the most important metrics to actually measure upon. And so oftentimes we have these vanity metrics that most nonprofit organizations will say like, oh yeah, this is our output. This is like what we're doing. Like we have so many numbers of volunteers. And it's like, is that really absolutely critical in the process of highlighting which metric is absolutely necessary to define what theory of change you've achieved? And more often than not, the answer is no. And so that's where you continuously iterate and always evolve. And so that's a very critical piece of the puzzle. If we want to jump to that next slide, please. So when you're designing for your theory of change, there's 2 ways to go about it. There are programmatic theories of change and then an operational theory of change. A programmatic theory of change is specifically along the lines of your own, along the lines of the programs that support the operation. So you can do this particularly, let's say like you have multiple different programs, and they are serving different interests, but along the lines of the organization as an operation. So in terms of doing the programmatic theory of change, you'll really want to highlight, okay, what are our inputs, our activities, our outputs, our outcomes, and our impact. Feel free to take a screenshot of this if you fancy this and you want to try this out with some of your programs. I would definitely recommend doing so if you're trying to put this into real time. Let me break this down. So inputs essentially refer to the supply of resources your nonprofit or project has. So these may be financial, intellectual, human resources, or what have you. But so an example of that would be funding for places on training courses or the time and training of mentors. Activities are concrete actions of what your nonprofit is actually undertaking. So this is typically the inputs put into place that are supposed to deliver on the outcomes intended. So group activity to deliver peer group support or mentoring of individuals by employee appointed mentors. And outputs. So this is most commonly the vanity metric that most nonprofits reference when you see those numbers on so many different websites that are like, hey, we've had 100 volunteers, or that came to our event, we had 10 donors. But in reality, are those metrics actually critical for defining the change that you've created? Most commonly, that's actually what's defined by an outcome. So an output are the products, services, or facilities that result from an organization's or project's activity. So that is definitely the example of like number of, or quantity of, or what have you. And so then when you actually tap into outcomes, that's where the real change is actually occurring. So outcomes are the changes, the benefits, the learnings, the effects resulting from the actual activities. And so that's really what is an opportunity for growth for a majority of the organizations that could support communicating like, yeah, we had 100 volunteers, but what actually happened from having these 100 volunteers, from actually having this intervention, this is what was actually achieved. And that as a user, it was a really insightful experience being on the marketing side, because we were finding that's really what a lot of the users are missing. And that's really what a lot of the users would aspire to have when they're going and deciding, like, is this really an organization I'm interested to donate to? Is this really an organization I'm interested in? And of course, you have some organizations where or individuals that have different relations to different organizations. Whereas if it's a cause, they 100% know. Like for instance, if it's Planned Parenthood, some people are like, I already know I'm interested in this cause. I'm already going to support. But if you're trying to garner newer types of individuals that aren't certain about what your organization does, or if they're just finding out about you, or if it's during Corona and the lack of trust might not fully be there, or as was shown in 2008 post that recession, a lot of people were very timid to give. And so outcomes are really what the game changers really can be, because that's really communicating, hey, this is really what actually happened by doing our types of activity to support this work. And then you lead into the ultimate impact. So the ultimate impact is the change that you intend to create because of what's already going on and where you're intending to go. So what are the strategic goals that align with your purpose, and what are the measurable results of achieving your vision? It is what the organization specifically is trying to achieve and hold itself accountable to. If we could go, thank you very much. So operational theory of change. So this is as an organization at large. What as an organization are you standing for, and what as an organization is going to be your roadmap to achieve your theory of change? So typically you'll just go through this from left to right. And so you'll say, okay, overall as an organization, what is our problem that we are trying to solve? Who actually is our key audience, and what are our key stakeholders? And so that column is really intended to highlight what key beneficiaries and stakeholders will be a piece of our equation that is important to communicate with, and make sure that they are part of the conversation entirely through. And so then at that point, you discuss, okay, if that is our audience, then how are we getting to them? What is the point in which that they are a part of our process, a part of our enrollment into our mission? and what is their entry point. And then it reads what steps are needed to bring about the change. And that's really where you're saying, okay, if we want this change, how will we actually be getting there? And that's really answering the how. What is the measurable effect of your work? And that's the like what. And then what are the wider benefits of your work? And that can often be the why. So what is the long-term change that you see as your goal is really centering that back to what is your impact. And all this to say, underneath all of this, you really want to press and continue to press what key assumptions are being made of all of this, because that will really support you in actually communicating your unintended impacts and actually highlighting the metrics that are most important to measure along. So if we could go on to that next slide. So some key takeaways and next steps to emphasize on your discovery process is to really, within your teams, this is kind of how I would start, is understand, okay, if we have a team of, let's say, an executive director, we have a few board members, we have a program director, we have a COO of operations, but actually we don't have a director of impact. We don't have someone entirely focused on our impact. I might be biased, but my first suggestion would be consider if that's important to you, and if that's a priority. My personal biased opinion is that yes, it would be. But whatever position your organization might be at, I would definitely bring to the table at least the people most involved and directly involved with your programs. So whether that is your program associates, your program directors, your COOs, your executive director, and maybe a few members of the board, just so that they are a part of this strategy planning as well. And making sure that the people on the team are absolutely enrolled at the table with what it really is that your team is hoping to achieve. And what you can do is you can really workshop this through maybe at your next board meeting, or set aside like a sprint to do this. And our team really likes doing sprints where we dedicate about 5 hours a day on every Friday to tackle our biggest company issues. And so we actually did this together where we're like, okay, like let's really align and make sure how are we actually intending to achieve our said impact for Community Boost. And it was fun. I got to actually walk them all through this, but more importantly, we actually got to surface really what our intended impacts actually are, and how we're planning to get there. So you get that alignment of really clear definition of success. So what it looks like, how will it be achieved, which specific metrics, and why root goals and objectives are the way that they are. And you can really start by asking those 4 questions, but then ultimately, if I were you, I'd really start by designing your theory of change. That's a really very critical first step in taking your impact management to the next level. So that information will be really critical in a way to place the lens for which you're prioritizing your measurement approach and moving forward, and actually begin to start collecting along the key metrics for your data. And so then when you do that, you start to, along the way, I would definitely recommend collecting the wins and the lows and the stories and just data with intentionality, and making sure that, like, as an organization, you're really pressing and surfacing the conversation within your team of, are things working? If they're not working, how can we improve them? And although that is often a very general question that teams will hope that they're doing, are they doing it enough? And making sure, like, it's okay if, like, to have some humility, because that's the entire point of impact management. Like, if you're not measuring what you're doing, then you have no real data to reference of where there is opportunity for improvement. And so you can't improve what you're not measuring. And so it's okay if there are lows, and really support your team in understanding that if there are lows, what should we be doing to mitigate them? And if we're not discussing them, then we don't really have the opportunity to measure it. And so that's the general takeaways of that. But if you want to go on to that next slide. So I mentioned this earlier in terms of how you want to communicate your impact. You're also welcome to take a screenshot of this. I really like this approach where it's a 4-step approach. And after you finish phases 1 and 2, you have the ability to communicate 4 phases, or four paragraphs, in that you now have your problem, you now have your solution, you now have what your intended impact actually is. So like if it's a user, a donor, what have you, they now know like what can they do to help? How are they the hero in your mission? And what will that actually lead to? If I were on the board trying to determine whether or not to give you additional money because of an impact project and you were to outline those 4 phases to me, I would believe I'd be personally enrolled. Or if I was a user going to a website and seeing someone outlining like, oh, what is this organization's problem? That's their solution. That's how I'm actually important to their solution. And this is actually what the solution will take me to. It's a very marketing approach to actually enrolling and engaging someone into what your work is intended to be. The alternative way that you could twist that is what is the problem? What is the solution? What's the success thus far? And that one is a really interesting one because it actually engages the user to realize that you're already en route to achieving success. You're already en route to achieving this mission. How can we support your team in actually moving the needle even further? And what is the spectrum of achievements or what's needed to get there? And then what is your impact? So again, that taps into like the hero aspect of how you can position the donor to be the hero. And so within each of these, you'll outline like what the executive summary of your organization would be, like what the problem would be and the solution and your impact, what your support will actually be. And then if this is for like a grant opportunity or your board, that's additionally where from the theory of change, you can bring in those metrics that you've identified and say like, these are our intended metrics. This is our actual plan of action, how we plan to achieve measuring this impact. Look, we know what we're doing. Now we just need the funding to actually achieve collecting the data. And so you can take that pause there as well. And so if we want to go on to that next slide. So these are honestly my 3 favorite books, and I am quite a reading nerd. And so if anyone also has some additional downtime during quarantine or would like to pick these books up, my absolute favorite is Lean Impact by Anne-May Chang. And if you haven't already met her in person or read her book, she just has a way with words that is so insightful as to how to begin measuring impact and just actually recognizing that if you aren't already doing it, that it's an absolute must to be doing. And she really explains it quite phenomenally. I would 10 out of 10 recommend that book, especially if you're just getting started or you just need an extra push as to enrolling anyone else on your team. That book will really do it. Doing Good Better, I thought it was a really interesting book as well. William, he really describes just kind of how the community at large can provide more effective altruism and how we can communicate why it's important to make a difference, as well as Engine of Impact. This is a little bit more technical of a book, but it's also really good to support you in breaking down the basics. And so I thought these are 3 really phenomenal books if you're just getting started or if you really want to deepen your understanding of how to be the best of the best impact measurement person on your team. And you'll be quite resourceful. And so if we want to go on to that next slide, this is a little plug for Community Boost. We are hosting a nonprofit marketing summit. It's entirely free on August 14th. I would super recommend that you register for it because we have some amazing speakers lined up. We have the head of global ad grants speaking at the summit. We have some of the leading marketing and donation folks from the Trevor Project. We have some folks from the Statue of Liberty Ellis Foundation. We have some folks from all over. Many of the organizations that will be attending will be speaking about how to accelerate your online giving and develop marketing agendas, as well as supporting communicating what your organization is up to and making sure that you're able to engage and enroll more people into your mission. So the link for that is I can share that, and it is also in this presentation. So if we want to go on to that next slide. So feel free if you would like to set up some time to connect after this. I'm more than happy to set up a free digital strategy session for anyone that has joined us today. My LinkedIn's in here as well as my email. And that link for the summit, if you wish to attend, is the Nonprofit Marketing Summit. It's going to be really great. I believe right now we're close to about 200 registrations, and we're hoping to get about a few thousand more. And so it's going to be a pretty big event, and there's going to be networking opportunities in that as well. But again, if you wish to talk, whether it's within the digital marketing world of Facebook or Google Ad Grants, or if it's within impact measurement and you want to chat the details of how you can get started, I'm more than happy to take some time to connect with you all after this. And feel free to shoot me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Morgan, you're on mute.
Realize that. Okay, here we go. So thank you so much, Reem. That was incredible. I think you did a perfect job kind of covering what it means to think about data and how to set up goals. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the specifics of tracking them, because that's what MilkCrate's all about. So we're really focused on helping people who are running programs at a nonprofit. I know some of you are in the education space, but I'm curious, are any of you running a program for volunteers, beneficiaries, or members, and you're struggling with both engagement and progress tracking that? Like, what are the outcomes and the outputs? Those questions that you get asked at the end when it's time to get the grant renewal. That's definitely the kind of moment where we come into play and want to help the nonprofit staff solve those questions efficiently and without doing a lot of manual work. Now, most of the time, the tools that people are relying on are a combination of analog and digital tools. The top blue ones are obviously the analog, and the purple are the digital. And these are, just some of the tools that we've seen nonprofits, when they come to MilkCrate, are kind of using in combination to try and reach the people that they're serving, and then track them and report on progress and impact. And what MilkCrate's all about is helping simplify and make more effective and efficient this whole process by implementing mobile apps that can do a much better job of reaching people and tracking their participation. So if some of you are already using these tools, feel free to throw into the chat your experiences with them, any strengths or weaknesses you've seen. Would love to hear about that in your personal experiences. Now, again, MilkCrate is kind of built to be an answer to this rat's nest of digital and analog tools that most nonprofits are relying on. What we offer is a platform that can launch white labeled mobile apps, which means each nonprofit is getting their own app with their brand and their content that they can launch quickly and affordably using ready to go features. So instead of having to design it from scratch and become, user experience and mobile design experts, we've done that for you. We've built the tools that you need to run an engaging nonprofit program, and that every time someone's doing something, that data shows up on your dashboard where you can manage your users, your content, and generate activity reports. So each nonprofit that we work with is getting their own branded app that comes with an admin dashboard where the data shows up and they can manage things. So you can have that instant reporting on the outputs and outcomes of your program. So you can start to really quantify the impact of what you're doing and make it easier to actually do it. So like I said, we really focus on in the nonprofit program lifecycle. Engage and evaluate is really where we live and the kind of problems we solve. Now, I have a couple of case studies I'm going to share. Obviously, COVID has changed and added to the workload of who we're working with. One of our clients that we'd already been working with, Inner City Capital Connections, runs a program in 8 different cities across the country. And before COVID, they were half in person, half online. And MilkCrate became the digital platform for their webinars, for their mentoring, chatting, and communication, for a calendar of events, for a resource directory. All of the information that their program participants needed was organized in their app and gamified. And also each group, each cohort in each city had their own experience, their own kind of separate visualization in the app, and segmented by the users in that way. So when they had to go completely remote, we were really happy that they were able to kind of have something already in place, but obviously that's not the case with every nonprofit. Most nonprofits are not yet having, have something like this set up. And that's why it's really important to consider options like a templated system like MilkCrate, where you can launch something quickly and affordably, versus having to, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in years getting it off the ground when the need is often right now or next month. We had a nonprofit, Jersey Cares, that came to us with a COVID-related initiative that they'd been tasked with to help seniors get meals delivered. And there were hundreds of orders in a week of seniors that needed food delivered, and then the hundreds of volunteers that were signed up to help, but there was no way to make it easy for them to connect. So now we launched a mobile app for them. I think it took 3 weeks, and now the volunteers are able to see the orders, sign up for them, complete them, take a photo and prove it, and all the work that they're doing is tracked by the app. So a basic user onboarding experience, kind of like I just said, a volunteer like the Jersey Cares initiative would download the Jersey Cares app built on MilkCrate. They'd create a profile, they'd join their team. So maybe it would be like a county in New Jersey, so they'd only see the seniors that need help in their neighborhood. And then they'd start completing actions and earning points. Or in the case of inner city capital connections, they would join a team that's the city that they're in the program for, and they'd start earning points for chatting with their mentor and completing activities towards the completion of the program. So as you can see, it's quite flexible based on the needs of the organization. Different features that make it easy for a nonprofit to take a real world experience and a digital experience and put it all into a mobile app are things like having an events calendar that can also function as a volunteer sign up system, being able to send push notifications so you can reach people instantly on their phone. Probably got some while we're in this webinar. We also have a system where you can track physical check-ins at locations. So we've had programs where you're trying to track teens going to museums, or adults going to parks, or a particular group trying to access medical care and different types of medical resources. So being able to have a directory in map view and list view where the GPS verifies that someone actually went. Polls and surveys are huge. Instead of having to link out to a survey monkey and have separate data living in one system, you can have your surveys and your polls all tied in with all your other data that your users are creating in their app experience. And obviously being able to segment your users into groups. Not all users should be having the same experience, and all their data shouldn't be all lumped into one. So that's really important as well. So curious if anyone's having any engagement or tracking problems they want to throw into the chat. Maybe what I've just said has sparked some thoughts, but feel free to share anything that might be going on with you, and we can certainly address that at the end. A couple of case studies I also wanted to share is the We Vote initiative. So We Vote is a program where employers were told, hey, if you want to make your workplace more, friendly to civic engagement and encouraging a culture of voting, we can send you materials that you can share with your employees. But it was very one directional. So the Committee of 70 would send the materials to the employer, but the Committee of 70 never knew what the employer did with them or what the employees did. And now they have an app where each employer has their own team or segment in the app, and the employees can all complete activities and earn points for being more civically engaged. And what's really powerful is having the outputs and outcomes data associated with this. So now we know, after running We Vote for a couple of cycles, that there were 450 instances of voters viewing the voter guide in the past election. And the app users were 50% more likely to vote after downloading the app at least 1 week before the election. So they were finally able to set a goal tied directly to the mission of the organization and measure it and see that they were actually moving in the right direction. And that was something that the app made possible for them. I think just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip ahead. So funders are often asking for this kind of data, and I'm curious if any of you have experienced barriers collecting this kind of data, and in what format their funders are actually asking for impact data. What our goal is at MilkCrate is to take that funding that you guys get from your funders that helps you run the program, set up an app so that your program can run better, more efficiently, and more effectively at engaging, that your participants download, that they engage with, that they complete activities on, and then their activities and progress all turns into data that you can easily then share back with your funders so you can keep getting funded. So this is kind of the virtuous cycle that MilkCrate's dedicated to creating for nonprofits. If any of you have ever been wondering what is accessibility for mobile and different demographics, I've often had people be like, well, what's the best way to reach everyone? How can you reach everyone? And I'm like, there isn't one magic bullet, but this is really important data from Pew that shows that the majority of Americans have a smartphone. And I think this often surprises people to see that across all demographics on that chart on the right-hand side, age, race, education, income, geography, the vast majority of people are relying on smartphones and increasingly more likely to go online using their smartphone. So it's not a magic bullet, but it is definitely the best way to reach people and the most equitable. One more case study I wanted to share is the Read by Fourth initiative. This is another volunteer client of ours. They have mostly older Philadelphians who are volunteering to promote literacy, going door to door and community by community to share resources and materials with families so that they can help kids get on grade reading level. These volunteers used to carry around a 4-inch binder with all the materials and forms. Now they have it all in the palm of their hand where they can access the MilkCrate app for the Read by Fourth initiative. And the volunteers have all the information they need. And every time they interact with a family, they can track it. And all that data shows up on a dashboard, making it really easy to track participation, as well as tying data to reading score improvements in different geographies. We'll skip this one just for time's sake. So just to give you a general overview of when it makes sense, if you guys are thinking about impact tracking for your organization, when does an app make sense? We've tried to come up with some bullet points that make it really easy to kind of assess this for yourself. We also do a 30-minute free discovery call where we can ask you these questions and kind of go back and forth and figure out if this would make sense as well. The most valuable thing we can do for a nonprofit is help them get to a yes or a no about whether this makes sense or not. And it's very important for us to get to know just as it is to get to yes, because we would never want to kind of engage with an organization where this isn't a good fit. So when it is a good fit is when you have the goal of better engaging your program participants, whether they're volunteers or members, and tracking the data. There has to be value to the users, meaning the app has to help them complete activities, consume content, communicate, make it easier for them to participate. Strategies like gamification and visual progress can be really helpful in this work. So knowing that if that's something that's going to be a good fit, having value to the staff, so the app and the admin tool make it easier for them to manage the program, and then your funders wanting to see that transparent success data. This is the simplest way I've come up with to kind of visually represent when a MilkCrate app makes sense. If you need consistent engagement and behavior data, that's when we make sense. We can, if anyone's ever explored an app, feel free to throw that into the chat. We'd love to hear about your experience, especially if you were freaked out by how much time or money it would take or expertise. It's really our goal to be the company that makes it so that those concerns are no longer an issue for nonprofits. For far too long, mobile technology was a luxury good that only large companies could afford. And we've built a system using templates and repetitive processes so that we can make it really easy and affordable to launch something like this. And because we've worked exclusively with nonprofits for several years now, we know what your needs are and how to develop the right features and strategy to solve your needs. We work with a wide range of types of nonprofits. That's why I tried to show a bunch of different case studies to kind of get the wheels turning about if this might make sense for your organization or not. So that's it for the presentation. What I want to do is just direct you to the survey. This is where you can indicate if you think either Community Boost or MilkCrate might be helpful, as well as give us some feedback about the presentation itself. I'm going to throw this into the chat so you guys can access that form. I would love it if you would fill that out either while we're waiting for questions or right at the end. So I'm going to stop presenting now. And I'm going to take a look over at the chat. And it looks like Dr. Paul Moore has a question. So we would love to hear your question. You can either type it in the chat or you could also take yourself off mute.
Hi, Morgan. Thank you. I think Reem later answered my question, but the context of it was whether the regarding the outcomes that she spoke about earlier, whether that's predominantly on the quantitative side, and if not, what could be maybe some ad hoc examples of that on the qualitative side. Thank you.
Sure, I'll go for it. I believe that when you're communicating your outcomes, it's a bit best to communicate in terms of both. I definitely it depends. Let's get a little bit on the ground. So what does your organization do?
We are starting a social academy at Broward College, and it's very new. And so the nonprofit space for me is new as an academic dean, coming from pretty much exclusively the academic side of the house. I was trying to get a better understanding of how at a certain point we would communicate our impact to interested parties and the senior leadership at the college. I know that's general, but we're kind of just getting off the ground.
Well, congrats. That's awesome, and an awesome next step and great first step as well. I think in terms of quantitative versus qualitative for what you're describing, it might make more sense to be a little bit more on the more qualitative side, because you're describing a little bit more of the context of how you're impacting the students and how, like, it's more of the juice of like, how are we intending to apply this change? And I think more on the quantitative side would be the outputs. And Morgan, feel free if you have an opinion on that as well.
No, I think you got that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? And feel free to type them in the chat or just come off mute. Did any of the strategies that we talked about resonate for you all as things that like you have done or want to do? I've never heard of. I'm curious to hear what of this may have been news or something that you've already explored. Was anyone surprised by the data around smartphone usage? I usually get some comments about that. People are like, I didn't know older people were using smartphones that much, or that income wasn't going to be such a big factor. You're a silent bunch. Okay, great. Thanks. Well, I do want to repeat that the survey is a great way to give feedback, and also to indicate if you think MilkCrate or Community Boost could be of help to your organization. We will be following up with an email to everybody, thanking them for participating, reminding them to fill out the survey, and if you would like a recording or the slides, to just do that and we will share it. So we definitely want to make that available. If you're still unsure or have questions, we're happy, like Reem said, we're happy to get on a call and just answer questions and see how we might be able to help if either of our organizations can help yours. I'm also going to just put a link to our website in here, just in case somehow you managed to not get that yet. Feel free to take a look at the examples as well as the product page. It kind of takes a deeper look at who we've worked with, the different templated features that are available. We even have public pricing, so there's no scary surprises. So we want you to know how affordable this can be. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, we can certainly end a few minutes early. But I want to I'll stay on the line for another minute or two in case anybody else has anything. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. Glad it was helpful. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to stop recording now.